Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Andrew Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about my Week 2 running back starter sits for the 2019 fantasy football season. On today's episode, we're going to be going over the Monday night games and who are the breakout players, and also if there were any waiver wire additions to be added to yesterday's list because of last night's games. Then I'm also going to be talking about the running back matchups for Week 2, then going into my top 36 rankings at the position. Before we start today's video, let me remind all of you that there are timestamps down in the description of the video. You can go, if you're looking for a specific player's insight from my opinion, you go down there, check that out. Also, while you're down there, if you haven't yet already, click that subscribe button, join the community, and if you haven't yet already, click that notification bell button to know when my latest content is out and when my live streams are up. Now, without further ado, let's get right into it. Hey everybody, how's it going? Also, down in the description, my Patreon link. For those of you who are interested in checking that out, go ahead. All right, so let's talk about the Monday night matchups from yesterday between the Saints and the Texans, and then after the Raiders and the Broncos. Okay, so Saints and Texans. In terms of fantasy production, overall fantastic game. Deshaun Watson looked great with 4 touchdowns, 3 through the air, 1 on the ground. I anticipated Deshaun Watson to be a great quarterback this season, plain and simple. They have surrounded him with the amount of help that they needed to. They've addressed the left tackle position. They've brought in running back help after Lamar Miller went down. They've added wide receivers now that Kiki Cutie's a little banged up. Kenny Stills, Laramie Tunsil, Carlos Hyde, Duke Johnson, all looked good respectively. DeAndre Hopkins, obviously, there's nothing else you can say about DeAndre Hopkins. He went into a favorable matchup as the best wide receiver in the National Football League in terms of talent. The guy dropped more passes than I've ever seen him do in a game, yet he was still just as good and won many people fantasy leagues yesterday. Will Fuller, a deep ball threat as per usual, taking the top off the defense. I would have liked to seen him get a little bit more work, but that wasn't the case. On top of it, Kenny Stills pretty much filling into that number 3 wide receiver role. Got himself a pretty juicy touchdown late into the game. Overall, a pretty good performance. Now the question is whether or not Kiki Cutie can come back and take that spot away from Kenny Stills, or how they're going to incorporate a 4th wide receiver into this offense when they typically don't run a lot of 4 wide receiver sets. Typically it's 2 to 3 at most, because they have a tight end always on the field or a running back. A lot of 11 personnel for this team. Moving on, Carlos Hyde looked a lot better than I thought. He was pretty washed up for the Jaguars and the Chiefs in the last 2 outings that he's had with those respective teams. Coming into Houston, filling into a role that needed a running back, played very well in terms of running the ball in between the tackles. Fantastic. Duke Johnson is the 3rd down back as we expected. Nothing, too big of a surprise there. Both of them got a good amount of work. I think about Carlos Hyde with 9 fantasy points and a half PPR, and Duke Johnson about 11. So all in all, pretty good performance between the two of them. Pretty satisfied with the running game there in terms of as a flex option. But that was the Texans. Good overall performance. Should have won that game, but hey, if you give Drew Brees a shot, he's going to be able to take that and maybe run away with it. And that's what he did. Speaking of Drew Brees, great performance, found his wide receivers, and found himself a W. Spread the ball out to pretty much everybody, whether it was Jared Cook, Traquan Smith, Ted Ginn, Michael Thomas. Obviously, Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara are the 2 leading receiving options of this team, as you can tell from the box score and the target counts. But he was able to spread the ball out. Traquan Smith, Ted Ginn, not really convinced just yet. And Jared Cook did not have a great performance when there's so much good tight end value on the waiver wire, especially this week. Makes it a little difficult to trust a guy like Jared Cook if he's not going to get the targets that he needs. And especially find a touchdown, which is extremely valuable for the tight end position as it currently stands in the landscape. In terms of the running back position, Latvius Murray was the guy that had the rushing touchdown that kind of took away some points from Alvin Kamara. Not to say that Alvin Kamara wasn't amazing. He absolutely was. The guy does not go down with first contact. He does not take big hits. And he's unguardable in terms of in the passing game. There's very few linebackers that can stay, on his hip and disturb him when it comes to trying to catch a ball. Plain and simple, the way it looks, looking at the snap counts between Alvin Kamara and Latvius Murray, Alvin Kamara played 76% of the offensive snaps for the running back position, so we don't really have to worry in terms of that. Even last season with Mark Ingram, he only played 61% of the offensive snaps. So as of right now, Kamara's getting more touches as we presumed. Latvius Murray is going to be used here and there as a change of pace, kind of a run down hill kind of running back, as I like to call it. I think I mentioned this a couple times. It's you run downhill 3 yards in a cloud of smoke, and next play, pretty much, or a cloud of dust, either way. But overall, good performances. Nobody really stood out to me in terms of waiver wire ads, but convincing performances overall, promising performances. Moving on to the next game. This is where it really matters. Josh Jacobs, fantastic, incredible. The offensive line of the Raiders, and the entire Raiders team, but the offensive line of the Raiders absolutely demolished the front seven of the Broncos. Von Miller rendered worthless. Bradley Chubb, I didn't hear his name called once. Overall, just a great performance for the Raiders. Looked great as an entire offense as a whole. Josh Jacobs really put a number in. I mean, like I said in videos prior, there's always been a running back in the last 3 seasons to be in the top 3. Josh Jacobs has made his argument, and he's going for it. He's going for it for sure. 2 touchdowns on the ground for him. Tyrell Williams stepping up as that number 1 wide receiver, absolutely filled that role into a tougher matchup. The corners of the Broncos are good. Chris Harris Jr. is a good cornerback, but still did not matter. Tyrell Williams played very well. And on top of it, the other receiving option for this team, Darren Waller, a waiver wire pickup, a guy that I mentioned in my Hidden Gems video as a soul stone on Friday. Fantastic. 30% of the target share. Played all 55 offensive snaps. 55, and was great. He played in the slot. He played on the line. He was spread around, and to be honest, looked great. A 10-point tight end. That's exactly what you want for fantasy purposes, and a guy that you should for sure be targeting in waiver wires. Obviously behind Hawkinson and Mark Andrews, but a guy that for sure should already be picked up. But a good play there. Going to the other side of the ball, Phillip Lindsay, Royce Freeman experiment. Each of them ran the ball 11 times. Not satisfied with that. That's very upsetting in terms of, hey, Royce Freeman's not good. Please stop giving him the ball. I know he's a good running back, but in terms of fantasy production, what Phillip Lindsay was able to do last season and prove, going against the Raiders should not be a difficult prospect in terms of running the ball. This team is a run-first team. That's what they want to do. They have a good offensive line for that reason. But, man, I don't know. I just feel like Phillip Lindsay needs to get more work, and if he doesn't, he's going to struggle heavily because the next couple matchups for them aren't very favorable, plain and simple. Got to play against the Bears in week 2, which is not going to be fun for either of those running backs. Moving on to Joe Flacco, had an okay game, made a couple mistakes here and there. At times held onto the ball for very, very long. If you don't have the legs to get out of the pocket, just throw the ball and just get rid of it. You're taking unnecessary sacks. But in terms of the wide receiver position, Cortland Sutton got a good amount of targets and reception and receiving yards. Emmanuel Sanders stepped up as the number 1 wide receiver, as we presumed he would. Deshaun Hamilton dropped a touchdown. Noah Fant was, similar. Very little usage thus far, but he's a rookie tight end. You don't really expect much from that. But overall, Darren Waller, if Emmanuel Sanders is not picked up already, I mean, come on, how is that possible? I've been talking about him for the last couple of months as a comeback player off that Achilles injury. Overall, good game there. Raiders really stuck it to them though. And that was a good performance. Okay, now let's move on. Let's get past also a couple more names I want to mention in terms of waiver wire. I didn't mention Adrian Peterson yesterday because I'm assuming he's already owned in your league. I know somebody mentioned that to me. Andrew, where's Adrian Peterson now that Darius Geis is hurt? Adrian Peterson should be owned in your league. If he's not, absolutely pick him up. The guy was a 1,000-yard receiver last year. I personally thought he was going to split the backfield with Darius Geis. Last week was deemed inactive by the team, maybe because they just really were comfortable with Darius Geis. But obviously, Darius Geis keeps doing what he's doing, keeps getting hurt, and Adrian Peterson should be picked up. Other than that, in terms of waiver wire targets, Mecole Hardman, sure, I don't mind that. A couple of you guys mentioned that. It just depends whether it's him or Demarcus Robinson. Another guy that we should mention, another rookie wide receivers, Devin Funchess broke his collarbone, so he's out for an extended amount of time. And you should probably look into perhaps getting either Paris Campbell or Deion Kane for the Colts, because that's going to be the number 2 wide receiver of that team going forward. anyway, so those are the kind of names that I just really wanted to mention and go over. Now, before we get into anything, let's talk about matchups, okay? Now, the matchups have been reset, okay? This is going off of only 1 week of performances, so there's not a lot of contributions in terms of getting an actual indication of how good a team is at stopping the run or giving up, good performances to opposing running backs. Now, obviously, the Los Angeles Rams got absolutely destroyed by Christian McCaffrey, which is why they were, as of right now, they're the worst team against the run. And the Baltimore Ravens completely throttled that offense, which they should have, and anybody's going to do to the Miami backfield for the rest of the season. Obviously, Chicago was great, Minnesota was great, New England was great, Seattle. We get an idea. I don't really want to put too much stock into this, but there are some defenses that aren't surprisingly bad against the run, that were bad last season. Miami, Atlanta, Los Angeles, as in the Chargers. Who's another team that really struggled against the run last season that has made their way back on top of this list? Where are the Bengals? Cincinnati's at 14. Yeah, they only get okay, but there was a lot of good performances at the running back position this past week. But there were some names here that weren't too surprising and should be keyed in on as we continue in week 2. So I just wanted to go ahead and show you guys this for those of you who are interested. And then now we can go back to talking about my top 36 rankings at the position, shall we? Okay, again, if you made it this far, thank you very much. If you've jumped around in timestamps and you somehow made it back here, great. All right, we're talking about the top 12 running backs right away. Rankings are subject to change. Remember that. They can change by Sunday. It really only takes one thing, and I'll flip a switch and I'll change somebody. But the top 12 running backs, typically, actually, the top 24 running backs should all be started. I'm not going to really talk about these guys to a very long extent. A couple words at most, and that's going to be it, plain and simple. So, number 1, Christian McCaffrey playing against a very favorable matchup on a short week against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense. Christian McCaffrey's this entire offense. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense should be exposed once again. I know Matt Breida, Raheem Mostert, Coleman couldn't do much, but McCaffrey's going to be able to take over. He is right now the best fantasy prospect in terms of points scored. Obviously, you're not counting quarterbacks, but all in all, Christian McCaffrey, my number 1 of the week, into a great matchup. Absolutely, number 1. Moving on to number 2, Alvin Kamara. Doing it again. He's doing the goods. He's bringing fantasy owners a lot of value, which he should. There's a reason why he's a top 3 back in terms of where he should. He was drafted this offseason going against the Rams. The Rams struggled heavily against Christian McCaffrey, and if you go back and look at how Alvin Kamara has produced against the Ram defenses, they played them twice last year, one in the playoffs and one in the regular season. Alvin Kamara has always been good against them because they have a difficulty stopping the running back in the passing game. I've been saying this for the last couple of weeks. I've said it for the last year. The Rams cannot stop wide receivers out of the backfield in terms of receiving. Moving on to number 3, Saquon Barkley has a very favorable matchup playing against the Buffalo Bills. Now, here's the thing. The Buffalo Bills matchup with the Giants is going to be favorable because it's not going to be a blowout. I don't see the Bills coming in and absolutely just boat racing them and putting up 30 on the board and making Saquon have to sit out for the second half. That's not going to be the case. I think this is a game where the Giants can absolutely compete and potentially win. Therefore, Saquon Barkley is going to be heavily used, and he's my number 3 running back because of that. I like the matchup, and I think he's going to be great, whether it's on the ground or through the air. Moving on to number 4, Ezekiel Elliott. Plain and simple, week 1, got the Le'Veon Bell treatment, wasn't given very many touches because he's not in game shape yet. But going forward is going to see more and more touches playing against the Washington Redskins this week. Whether or not he gets the ample amount of touches, I'm expecting him to do so. He's going to have a full week of practice under his belt here, and they're going to continue to give him the ball. The only concern is whether or not Kellen Moore's new offense as the new offensive coordinator is going to permit them to pass the ball more or just continue the running of seasons prior. If, in fact, they're continuing to see more passing attempts for Dak Prescott and they want to pass the ball more, it could potentially hurt Ezekiel Elliott, but if he gets more usage in the passing game, shouldn't be a big deal. He's my number 4. Moving on to number 5. We have Dalvin Cook playing against a pretty decent matchup against the Green Bay Packers. I don't see Dalvin Cook having any struggles, though. just watching what Dalvin Cook was able to produce against the Falcons. I know the Falcons defense struggles, but if in fact the Chicago Bears even slightly focused in on just giving David Montgomery the ball last week, they would have had a good performance from a running back. Dalvin Cook looked incredible, was given 20-plus touches, whether it's through the air or on the ground. This offensive line and tight ends, they can bang, and they can move the ball easily on the ground. That's what they're going to do. My number 5 running back, completely satisfied with that. A great performance in week 1. So moving on, let's go to my number 6 guy, Le'Veon Bell. Le'Veon Bell, good amount of touches. That's exactly what we wanted to see. Having 18 plus touches. I think it was almost 20 touches, to be honest. He had 5 receptions and 17 rushing attempts. So yeah, a good plus 20. That's exactly what you want from your RB1. That's beautiful. Going against the Cleveland Browns, who got completely destroyed by Derrick Henry, should be just fine. Obviously, Le'Veon Bell's offensive line is not as good as the Tennessee Titans right now. But as of right now, it doesn't matter whether he's on the ground or through the air. Le'Veon Bell is going to get a bunch of touches, and he's going to be fantasy relevant into a good matchup at home on Monday night. Has a long week of rest ahead of him, and should be good this coming week as my number 6 running back. Moving on to number 7, Austin Ekeler. If Austin Ekeler is going to be given the ball as much as he is, or he has been, why not? Here's the thing. Austin Ekeler, I've talked about him to a very long extent this offseason in terms of drafting and targeting the guy. But you play against the Lions. And what David Johnson was able to do against the Lions last week should just be emulated again from the Chargers. Austin Ekeler, a capable receiving back, a guy that is great on the ground, is going to run the ball a bunch. Plain and simple. They want to run the ball. This offensive line is built for running the ball in Los Angeles for the Chargers. And Ekeler behind the line honestly gets kind of lost in there. He's such a smaller guy, smaller stature, that defenders are just like, okay, where the heck did this guy go? Boom, he's off for 20 yards. Great week 1. Should have a great matchup in week 2 against the Lions. I'm 100% convinced that if Melvin Gordon continues to hold out, this guy is just going to continue to be one of the premier backs if they continue to just feed him the ball. Moving on to number 8, Nick Chubb. Had a rough week 1, but that's not a big deal because Hilliard, the backup running back, is doubtful to play this week. So hopefully he's not going to steal the goal line carry and steal those 6 points that Nick Chubb needed. That being said, Nick Chubb will be playing against in the Monday night matchup on the other side of the ball of Le'Veon Bell. To be honest, this entire offense, they got completely smashed on Sunday against the Titans. They've got to reflect, they've got to readjust, and they've got to learn from their mistakes. Number 1 mistake is not starting the entire game by just feeding Chubb consistently. He had 17 rushes for 80-some-odd yards, a good yard per carry average. Got to feed him the ball more. You got to get Nick Chubb more implemented, and I think that's what they're going to do this week. He's my number 8 running back. Moving on to number 9, yes. Derrick Henry is my number 9 running back this week. What he was able to do without Taylor Lewan against a good defensive line. Okay, you have that screen pass for 75 yards and a touchdown. That's an extra 13.5 points, but I'm not taking that away from him, right? He's capable of doing that on any given week, especially if Marcus Mariota is rolling out one way and defenders are just trying to, catch him. It's a lot of bait and switch, but Derrick Henry moving into a very good matchup. I mean, just looking at what Austin Ekeler was able to do against the Indianapolis Colts defense last week. If you have the Titans do something even close to similar, I mean, Derrick Henry should be good, plain and simple. I mean, listen, I'm not salty about it. I wanted Derrick Henry to be good. I just didn't think he would be. And hey, if he can prove me wrong, that's perfectly fine. You can even go back to when I talked about him early in the summer on the Trust or Bust. I know that if Derrick Henry's a great running back, that's perfectly fine. I even said it in that video. I want him to be good. I didn't think they'd give him the ball as much. Thank God they finally are. Feed him the rock. He's my number 9. Moving on to number 10, Josh Jacobs, another guy that had a major week 1 into a great matchup. You play against the Kansas City Chiefs at home again, another great home matchup. If this offensive line continues to just batter defenses, why not? Josh Jacobs can work in the passing game, can work on the ground. And to be honest, for as good as that Broncos front 7 is, I mean, sure, they're a pass rushing bunch, but I don't see the Tennessee Titans being any different. I think Josh Jacobs could have a great game against the Chiefs this week. Whether or not the game script changes because Patrick Mahomes lights them up early doesn't really matter because Jacobs can be used out of the backfield. We did see a little bit of usage from James Washington and Jalen Richard, but it didn't really affect Josh Jacobs very much. He's my number 10 this week. Moving on to 11, Chris Carson. Plain and simple. There's no such thing as the Rashad Penny. Rashad Penny does not exist. Chris Carson is the one and the only. From what we can tell, you're playing against the Steelers, a good run-stuffed defense, really stopped Sony Michel last week. Not really concerned about that because Rex Burkhead and James White were just fine. Chris Carson's my number 11 into a good matchup as the clear back, getting receptions out of the backfield. Perfect. He's my number 11. Moving on to number 12, Mark Ingram playing against the Cardinals. Mark Ingram had to be good this season. I don't understand why people didn't think he was going to be great. You're playing in an offense that wants to run the ball. And you're playing into matchups that are very favorable. Miami, Cardinals, and then I think next week, if I'm not mistaken, who do they play next week? Where is it? They play against the Chiefs the following week. Should be a good matchup all in all for them. So Mark Ingram at my number 12. These are the guys you play and you don't worry about. Plain and simple. Moving on. These are another group of guys, the 13 through 24, the RB2s that, again, you can play and somewhat not worry about. When we get to 24, we'll talk about that, okay? But I think 13 through 23 should be players that you should not worry about. Those 11 guys you shouldn't worry about, okay? So let's go ahead and let's talk about James Conner, my number 13. Sure, he had a very, very rough week 1. You play against the Seahawks in week 2, who they completely destroyed Joe Mixon. They did not allow Joe Mixon to do anything out of that backfield. Got injured, but then Giovanni Bernard came in and was able to get something going. I think James Conner is going to be given the ball 25 times this week. Should be great. The only reason I have him outside of my top 12 is just in case the Steelers continue to struggle. If they cannot move the ball on the ground, or the Seahawks get up early and they have to pass heavily, James Conner could be washed out of the game plan. And if he's not given enough targets out of the backfield, just is rendered worthless. But either way, he's still a top back. He needs to be started. Number 13. Number 14, David Johnson. Great week 1. Used heavily in the passing game. The offensive line was able to move defenders in the running game. Whether it was the read option, pitch option, they were able to do a couple, different things within this offense. Obviously, they had an extra, 10 minutes of scoring fantasy points, but all in all, David Johnson looked good once this offense really started to get into their rhythm. This coming week, you have the Baltimore Ravens, the best defense against the run thus far. Obviously, they smashed the Miami Dolphins, but that's also because they are good. They're no joke. The Ravens are at home. David Johnson is a little bit lower than I probably would have regularly had him against any other matchup, but you got to be careful. The only reason he's this high is because he has the ability to work in the passing game. And like I mentioned yesterday, the Arizona Cardinals ran 4+ wide receiver formations 45 times on Sunday, and the rest of the NFL on Sunday only did it 35 times total. So this team wants to pass the ball, and David Johnson's a receiver, so it should be fine. Moving on to 15, Damien Williams. Playing against the Oakland Raiders is going to be fine. Damien Williams is going to get his work, whether it's on the ground or through the air. They have no Tarik Cohen there, so they're going to have to use the running back position. I understand LeSean McCoy is there. LeSean McCoy did get more yards on the ground, and he got a good amount of work, but I really do think that LeSean McCoy's usage had to do with game script. LeSean McCoy was given the ball as much as he was later in the game because they were up so many points. If, in fact, this is a close game, sure, there's always a potential that LeSean McCoy comes in early, but Damien Williams is the starting running back for now. He's my number 15 this week. Moving on to 16, Kerryon Johnson. Struggled. I know many of you are asking, Andrew, what's your opinion on Kerryon Johnson? Like I mentioned yesterday when I was talking about the lessons I learned from the Detroit Lions, Kerryon Johnson had been given the ball, 18 plus times, 20 times? Like he had 2 receptions and, 16, 17 rushes? All in all, I love that kind of usage. That's exactly what I want. Even with, C.J. Anderson touching the ball 10 times. I want to see Kerryon Johnson run the ball, and that's exactly what he's going to do. He's playing against the Chargers defense. They got completely ran over by Marlon Mack and should have a good week here at home. And as long as he continues to get those kind of touches, he's going to break one eventually. Moving on to 17, speaking of Marlon Mack, the guy that just completely proved to everyone, you know what, we don't need Andrew Luck. We'd love to have him, but Jacoby Brissett is just as good in this offense. And as long as this offensive line is in front of me, I'm going to make plays. He picked up exactly where he left off last season in terms of regular season production. The guy found the end zone, had a huge 63-yard run, career high for him, over 100. I think he had 170 rushing yards. Insane. You don't need passing work if you're going to completely. We don't need passing work where we're going. Okay, but he should be great. Going into the Tennessee Titans matchup, Tennessee's good against the run. But if Marlon Mack has continued to be, given the ample amount of touches, should be fine in this offense. My number 17 of the week. Moving on to 18, Leonard Fournette. A little disappointing against the Chiefs, to be honest. I would probably say a lot of it had to do with game script and them being down so many points, similar to, just what I mentioned a little bit earlier with LeSean McCoy. Game script makes a big difference. If Leonard Fournette isn't given the ball on the ground, sure, he's going to get a lot of work in the passing game because there's really no other running back behind him. He is the lone guy. There is no third down back coming in for him because it's Leonard Fournette. He can do it all. So as of right now, going into the matchup against the Texans should be fine. I like the prospect of it, but I'm only concerned about the quarterback play. If they get down early again and Leonard Fournette isn't able to run the ball consistently, it's going to hurt him. But either way, he absolutely needs to start. He's my number 18 this week. Moving on to number 19, we have Devin Singletary of the Buffalo Bills. Should be able to take over this backfield. Should be able to have a great week against a Giants defense that's not great. Sure, Ezekiel Elliott couldn't take advantage of it, but it's because they didn't give Ezekiel Elliott the ball 25 times. Sure, Devin Singletary might not see it 25 times, but he's going to be at least 15 touches, whether it's on the ground or through the air. Should be a great running back. He is the starter of this team. Frank Gore is there to BS. TJ Yeldon probably cut soon or just made inactive. All in all, Devin Singletary is my number 19. I like that. Moving on to 20, Matt Breida. Matt Breida, please don't go to the locker room in the first quarter. I don't care if you're dehydrated. I don't care if you broke your arm. Just don't leave the game. Stop. Just stop, please. I don't want to get worried about you. Okay, we had to worry about you all of last season. You have a very good matchup here against the Bengals, and you are the lead back of this team. Please, Kyle Shanahan, don't give the ball to Raheem Mostert. Now, I know I mentioned him yesterday, but Breida, just give Breida the ball. Give him the ball 20 times. I don't care. Give him the ball 20 times. He'll do something with it. He is a breakaway running back. He's going to bust out for a 40-yard run. Breida, you're my number 20 this week. I'm trusting you, baby. Let's go. Moving on to 21. Joe Mixon and Giovanni Bernard. Either or, depending on who plays. If Mixon plays, you start him up. If Giovanni starts and Mixon's out, according. They're my number 21 against the 49ers defense. Should be a favorable matchup. Obviously, Ronald Jones and Peyton Barber couldn't do anything against that, but I think this Cincinnati team will be able to take care of that. Whoever it is, I like them right now. Here's the thing. I would typically have Mixon higher in this matchup, but no matter what, he's still ailing an injury. If he plays, he still has an ankle injury. And as a running back, that's not what you want. So I think they might just hold him out. They don't need him in this week, I don't think, because Giovanni Bernard is just as capable within this scheme. So we'll see. Moving on to 22. Yep, Todd Gurley's at 22. Reasoning. If Todd Gurley's not given the goal line touches, if you're going to let Todd Gurley run the ball all the way down to the 5-yard line, then pull him out and let Malcolm Brown steal touches and touchdowns, Todd Gurley is not as valuable. Plain and simple. My only concern at this point is Todd Gurley versus the Saints. Plain and simple. The Saints have always, just last season, when I say always, I'm taking the last season sample of the 2 games that they played against the Saints versus the Rams. Todd Gurley has struggled. He has not been the feature player on that offense. It's a lot had to do with Jared Goff and his arm being able to find Cooper Kupp, Brandon Cooks, and Robert Woods. So Todd Gurley this coming week should be a decent play. Okay, I don't mind him as my RB2, but if he does not find that touchdown, I can't have him in the top 12. I just can't. Malcolm Brown is just going to steal value and vulture stuff like that, and they're going to limit his touches. They even said, Sean McVay's like, he's not on a pitch count. Oh, no, he was on a pitch count. You didn't want to give him the ball 15 times. They didn't want to. They did, But they didn't want to. They wanted to limit him as much as they can. He looked great, man. He looked so good. Give him the ball, please. Hopefully, what they were doing was they were saving him for the Saints game. Like, they were like, oh, we don't need him against the Panthers. Let's keep him healthy. He's fucking healthy, guys, for next week. Anyway, moving on. Let's talk about number 23, Tarik Cohen, a guy that's in an RBBC shirt, but is going to get his touches, whether he's out of the backfield or in a slot position. In a PPR, he is absolutely very valuable. Half PPR, perfect. Standard, you don't have to worry about Tarik Cohen unless he scores a touchdown. But Tarik Cohen, all in all, 23 running back. I like him into the matchup against the Broncos this week. Should be great, and I don't mind that. Moving on to number 24, Sony Michel. This is the biggest concern that all of you are probably going to light me up for. I think Sony Michel has a very great opportunity to have a redeeming week here. He had 15 rushes for 14 yards against the Steelers. I get it. Trust me. If anything, I should be the most pissed about this, right? He lost me a week. Great. I'm sure he lost you a week too. But that being said, you play Miami. Miami's the worst defense. They are the worst offense. They are the worst team in the National Football League. They are in the running for the number one pick to get, whether it's the Alabama quarterback or the Clemson quarterback or somebody else. They're in the running for it. As of right now, the way it seems, I like Sony Michel's odds of having a redeeming week. That's why he sits at my number 24 spot. There's no way he doesn't get those 15 touches again. He's going to. He's the starting running back of this team. So that's why I have him at 24. Moving on, let's talk about my 25 through 36 running back rankings for this week. Speaking of the New England Patriots, another running back from the group, James White is my number 25 running back. Got a great amount of work. And to be honest, is going to continue to see that work. Whether it's in the passing game or on the ground, he can play in the slot. Doesn't matter. James White's going to see a lot of work in this offense. He is a favorite of Tom Brady. But now that you add Antonio Brown, it doesn't help him. That's why he's not any higher in this very favorable matchup, because this team could go up early and run the ball heavily, and that doesn't include James White very much. Moving on to number 26, Duke Johnson. Duke Johnson played well. Absolutely played well in week one. Play against the Jacksonville Jaguars, a good matchup. I like him as a flex option going forward in PPR formats. It should be great for Duke. Obviously, Carlos Hyde is still in that backfield, but he did get some rushes out of the backfield himself, so that should work. I like Duke at 26. Moving on to 27, Miles Sanders, another hotly contested player that a lot of you are going to say, Andrew, what the heck? Why is Miles Sanders on this list after he dropped a very unfavorable game in fantasy? Let me tell you, Miles Sanders, sure, he finished with 3.1 points in half PPR fantasy, but he had a 27-yard touchdown, 20-something yard touchdown called back on a bogus J.J. Arcega-White holding call that he didn't even need to do, and Miles Sanders would have still been in the end zone because Josh Norman wasn't going to make that play. The way I see it, Miles Sanders is the starting running back of this team. He had the most snaps amongst all running backs, almost doubled up snaps in terms of Jordan Howard. Darren Sproles was brought in the game because of game script and having to come back in terms of catching the ball out of the backfield. I think Miles Sanders into this matchup against the Falcons. The Falcons got destroyed by whether it was Alexander Madison or it was Dalvin Cook. To be honest, I think Miles Sanders should be higher than 27, but to be safe, he's sitting at 27. I really do like him as a flex this week. I liked him last week. Should have had that touchdown, but it happens. Moving on to 28, Adrian Peterson. He's going to be the starting running back this week. He's a guy that is coming off a 1,000-yard season, a running back that, yes, he is old, but he's still a legend, and he's still a good running back behind this offensive line in this team. If this team is going to continue to play as well as they did on Sunday, sure, in the second half, weren't as good. But if they can come out and look like somewhat similar of a team, Adrian Peterson is going to have value, because if this offense can move the ball and get him down to the red zone, he has his own ability to find himself some fantasy value. So he's my number 28 this week. Moving on to 29, Malcolm Brown, another flex option that I like. A guy that potentially against the Saints this coming week could steal some touchdowns, could see a lot of work, had 10 touches. And to be honest, for the Rams, if you're going to have 10 touches, you're going to be of a pretty good value. I mean, he was running over a lot of defenders for the Carolina Panthers on Sunday. So I think Malcolm Brown has a pretty good opportunity going into this week to have some flex, upside this week. So Malcolm Brown, probably off waivers. I wouldn't mind him at my flex. Oh, God, my neck. Oh, sorry about that, guys. Moving on to number 30. Speaking of the other side of the ball, the Saints. We have Latvius Murray playing, and here's the thing. Latvius Murray is not going to see the ball. I mean, it's a 75-25 split. It's pretty much what Ekeler and Justin Jackson deal with. If Latvius Murray doesn't get that touchdown, he scores 5 points last night. And is that going to be any different? Sure. I think running the ball against the Rams is probably the best thing to do, but I think that's going to be Alvin Kamara's job. Latavius Murray, as a flex option, wouldn't mind it, but he needs to find that end zone to be valuable. Moving on to 31, Aaron Jones. Plays against the Vikings. The Vikings destroyed Devonta Freeman, who's my number 32. The week prior, Aaron Jones got destroyed by the Bears. So the way it looks is that if Aaron Jones is available in your league, in terms of, hey, the guy that owns him doesn't want him anymore, go and trade for him, leave him on your bench, and eventually he's going to find himself some value. Right now, it looks like Aaron Jones is about to get smacked again. Not even kidding. I think he might get completely smacked in week 2 by this defense. That's why I have him at 31. I'm actually very concerned about his usage with Jamal Williams there, and it's not a favorable matchup to say the least. Moving on to 32, Devonta Freeman. Similar thing. Devonta Freeman got smacked. Destroyed by the Vikings. That's why I'm worried about Aaron Jones. On top of it, Devonta Freeman has to go play against the Eagles, who aren't good against the run, or who are great against the run, and suck against the pass. So what does that mean? Probably Matt Ryan's throwing the ball a ton this Sunday. He's throwing the ball to Hooper, to Ridley, to Julio, to Sanu. And maybe even Devonta Freeman gets left out of the equation this coming week. And that's why I have him at 32. I really don't think he's going to get a lot of yards. If he scores a touchdown, great, but that doesn't make him have a relevant week. Didn't go out for many passes. Ito Smith was used and was more efficient. Just concerned about Devonta Freeman. He's my 32. Moving on to 33, a guy that as a third down back has value, plain and simple. You play against, what do they play against? Goodness gracious. What am I even thinking? Where's the Redskins playing this week? They play against at Washington against the Cowboys. Thank you very much. To be honest, if you're a third down back and you're going to see 7 touches or 7 targets, it should be great. I don't mind that at all. He is a flex option. He's a Duke Johnson-esque kind of option, but because he plays for the Redskins, I have a little bit less confidence in him, but I don't mind him as a flex, especially in a PPR format. Moving on to number 34, LeSean McCoy is gonna see the ball, plain and simple. Whether he does it early or often against the Raiders, he should be used. Going to have some value here as a flex option going forward. Should be fine. Not really concerned about LeSean McCoy. I think LeSean McCoy should be just fine in terms of value. I don't know, man. It's a little sketchy. I want a little bit more, sample size, a little bit more of a sample size between him and Damien Williams to see exactly whether or not it was a game script issue on why LeSean McCoy touched the ball so often, or whether they're honestly just 50-50 splitting it. And if that's the case, then LeSean McCoy will be a little bit higher and Damien Williams should be a little bit lower. But all in all, he should be a good flex play. Moving on to 35, Ronald Jones. Here's the thing. As of right now, Bruce Arians, prior to this video coming out, before me even recording this, Bruce Arians said that they're going to stick with Peyton Barber as a starting running back. So that's concerning. But then he also followed that with Ronald Jones is going to get touches. If he has the hot hand again, he's taking over. I was like, okay, great, bet. Because honestly, I think he's going to be able to do it. In terms of stopping the run, the Carolina Panthers weren't great against the Cowboys. Against the Rams, holy moly. I saw the Cowboys logo next to me and I was like, Cowboys? Okay, no. I think here's the deal. Ronald Jones should be the starting running back of this team, but this offense did not look good on Sunday. And if they can go ahead and turn it around, find Ronald Jones, give him the hot hand, and feed him consistently, then maybe we find some value. Otherwise, he doesn't even need to be on this list if they're not going to give him the ball. Moving on to 36, David Montgomery. Here's my issue with David Montgomery. It's an RBBC. He wasn't given the ball enough. He has a really good matchup against the Broncos. If the Bears can do just exactly what the Raiders did and just maul the up front 7, which they have the capabilities of doing so. They have a good offensive line. Better at pass blocking than run blocking, but still. David Montgomery could find value. I'm just worried. If they continue to treat him as a rookie and they're not going to give him the entire backfield of production and they're going to give Mike Davis touches, then you can't really consider him as even a play. The last name I wanted to mention that's not on this list, because I don't know where I want to put him. I really don't. That's why rankings are subject to change. I don't know where I want to put Rex Burkhead. Plain and simple. I know I want to put Rex Burkhead on this list, and I know I have to get rid of one of these players. And I don't know who exactly. But only in time will I be able to figure that out. I really do believe Rex Burkhead should be on this list. I couldn't find it. I don't know what it was. I didn't want to move David Montgomery off this list. I didn't want to move McCoy or Ronald Jones off this list. Probably wanted to move Devonta Freeman, but I had to talk myself out of that. But as of right now, Rex Burkhead into that Miami Dolphins matchup is way too juicy. Anyway, thank you everybody for watching. Hopefully you liked today's content. If you did, click that like button. If you haven't yet already, click the subscribe button. Tomorrow will be Wide Receiver Wednesday. We'll talk about the wide receiver positions and such. If you guys don't have your waivers set, put them in, because tonight typically is when waivers run. Plain and simple. Thank you everybody for watching. Hopefully week 2 will be a lot better than week 1. And if your week 1 was already consisting of Austin Ekeler or Sammy Watkins or Christian McCaffrey, then you're set to have another good week. Thank you everybody for watching. And until tomorrow, I will see you guys. Have a wonderful Tuesday. Peace.